Awesome. Hi guys, welcome to the Ruby Mob for July 5th, 2018. We're going to be talking about the object self. Joining me today is Kevin only. So it's just Kevin and I. Kevin, say hi. Yes. Awesome. So let me share my screen. We're going to randomize whoever's going to lead us. Yes. Okay. Kevin says we don't have to randomize, it's okay. Let me look for my book. I haven't seen it in a while. I think it's in desktop. I had, yes, yeah. There it is. The well-grounded Rubist. We were about the object self. Yeah, the default object self, scope, and visibility. So a brief introduction, a brief cover up of what we're going to do in this chapter is the role of the current or default object self, scoping rules for local, global, and class variables, constant lookup and visibility, method access rules. So generally what we're going to do is cover the object self and the scope. Know what a scope is and what self, scope, and visibility. Okay, so where to start? I don't think we're supposed to read this whole thing because it's a brief introduction. If you don't have the book, Well Grounded Rubist, you can always contact us. We can give it to you. So we can start here. Understanding self, the current default object. So one of the cornerstones of Ruby programming is the default object or the current object. At every point when your program is running, there's one and only one self. There can only be one self. Being self has certain privileges, as you can see. In this section, we'll look at how Ruby determines which object is self at a given point. So there can only be one self at a given time. Self is like me. Like they can never be two me's. They can be someone else called Getty. They can be someone else with hair like mine or eyes like mine, but there's no one who can be a typical duplicate of me. That's the same as the object self. So who gets to be self and where? There's always one and only one. They're really insisting on this current object or self. You can tell which object it is by following the small set of rules that are summarized below. So take for example this top level of program. A top level program is any code that is outside of their blocks. When we talk about blocks, we're talking about either a class or a method. Yeah, that's a top level program or a top level code. And the self in any top level code is called main ever. So main is like the default of all defaults of all self. So anytime you have code that is outside any block, it has the main self. We have context, which is class definition. Within a class definition, the self is always the class object. So when I open a class, for example, let me show. I'll be, so let's create a class called Kevin and call self. I don't know if this is, and then end. Self will be Kevin, and Kevin to us now is the class or the class object. A class is also an object deriving from what we've learned in the earlier chapters. So whenever I open a class without doing necessarily anything, our object self will always be that class object. We have another context, the module definition. So you know that modules don't necessarily have instances like like classes that do. So when you define self in a module object, that module will always be the self. So we can try this out the same way we've done for class. We can do module. I don't know if it will accept the same name. So to be safe, let's do Kevin too. And then I call self. And then end. So what am I expecting? I'm expecting to get Kevin too because that's our self object currently, since we haven't told the module to do anything specific. Awesome. We have another context, the method definitions. Yeah. So anytime you define a method, there can be various examples and various instances where anything within that method falls under. So there's the top level. This is outside any definition block. So we have a method and we call self on it. So if we have a method and we call self on it, whatever object is the self when the method is called, top level methods are available as private methods to all objects. So this method, this specific method, the method name method, it is available to any object that calls this method. So the self in this case will be any object that is entitled to this method. The second instance, Kevin, do you have a question so far?
My question is just not really a question.
Yeah.
When you are creating the module and class, actually, when you create a class or a module, the return value will always be the class.
Mm-hmm.
But you are saying the self is like the self. You are the way you are putting it is that the self is the one bringing the return value of. Like for example, if you just get an empty class or an empty module, the return value will be that class or module.
Sorry, if we get an empty?
Just create a class without the self.
Okay. Class probability. And like that, we're going to get nil since we haven't told it to do anything. Yeah.
Okay, I'm answered.
Thank you, Kevin, for that observation. And we have a second example, instance method definition in a class. So we have a class called C. Inside that class, we have a method called method name. And inside that class, inside that method, we define self. So what is going to be self for us? Self is an instance of C corresponding to method name. So the self in this case will be any instance of C. I hope you guys remember how to create a new instance of a class. You just do the class dot new. You would have created a new instance of a class. And any instance of a class is called an object. You need to note that. That will revolve around everything in Ruby. So when we call the self in this case, it will refer to any instance that we create that is of class C, and that instance needs to respond to this method called method name. I hope that's clear. Then we have the third example, instance method definition in a module. The same way we had a class here, but instead we have a module here. Take into consideration that modules don't have instances. So we have a module, and inside we have a method, and inside we have self. We call self. So what will be our self inside a module? We're told that individual object extended by M or instance of that class that mixes in M. Can you help us understand this better, Kevin?
I think. Oh, oh, can you? Am I clear?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So probably let me share my screen. Oh, let me try it in the. I want to open. Are you able to see my? So, assuming we have a module object, that it has the method name, but inside it, let's just return self. No. And then I have a class. Then I have a class person that mixes in the getting module. So, oh, what is that? I don't know if I'll have an error. Yeah, I have to do this out. To be getting. And so, according to that statement, is that if you have a module like we have get here, and you have a method in the module which returns self, the self in this case will be the instance or the object that the name will be, the instance or the self will be the receiver of this method in the class where it mixes in this module. So we have a class person, it includes the getting module. So if I create an instance of class person, yeah. If I create an instance of class person, let me create G, then I'll call name. I'm expecting self to be person. Is it really person? What to be G? Yeah? So going back to, let me just before I remember. Have you go back to the book? The book. Just click the book. Because it was saying that individual object extended by M or the instance of class that mixes in M. Instance of the class that mixes in M. So in this case, there we have created an instance G. So our cell here will be G, like you say. The instance is the person class, which is the class from where we are instantiating the name. The instance yes is G, but the self in the module, it's an instance of the class person. So self is self is person. The person, it's a person class that we are instantiating. Okay, let me if you go back to the, you're in the document. So if you have an instance method definition in a module, which object is self? Individual object extended by M is the class that, like, for example, mixes in M. Let me say that in short. The class that mixes in M, in that case, is the self. Or an instance of class that mixes in M. So actually, what we have done here is the same as if I have a class, let me say account, and I have a method name that also has self. So if I have this, and then create an instance, let me say, is equal to then call name. Self here, we are expecting account the self. If I call name, I'm expecting account. Actually, this is the same thing because, as you know, if you do module get here and you mix it here, it's just the same as this method here being inside this class. So, yeah, so I think yes. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let me let me get a new class. Let's call it. Then let me have a method. Okay. Let me print. Yeah. Then if I create an instance of school and call name, let's it's school. Yeah. According to you, it's which is it's yes uh nice makes sense. I think you are in your expectation. You're expecting S. In your expectation initially, I think you're expecting S to be set, but S is an instance of the school class. Not clear. Well, let's go back to the. So, yeah, yeah. So, let me go to which one. Okay, let me just go one step up before even we went to module. So, in the method definition top level, outside any definition block, like this one, whatever object is self, which object is self? So, whatever object is self when the method is called. So, in this case, if, for example, the one in number one, okay, method definition number one. They're saying self is whatever object is self when the method is called. Oh, yeah, I think I get it. Yeah, this one actually is okay. It's not this. Yeah, it's a school object. This is a school object. The self will be the school object, which is an instance of school class. So this is not really this, yeah, but it's a object created from or instantiated from. Yeah, yeah.
So thank you, Kevin, for that discussion. Um, so to know which object is self, you'll need to know what context you're in. A context is like a scope, maybe, but yeah, yeah, but we'll look at that later. So in practice, there aren't many contexts to worry about. There's the top level, such as the class definition. there are class definition blocks, module definition blocks, and method definition blocks. Aside from few Kevin, please, what's this word?
Usually subtleties.
Sa-
Subtle. The B is
oh,
silent.
subtleties.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, okay, subtleties in the way these contexts interact. That's about it. So let's jump to here. The most basic program context in some respects in a unique one is the top level, the context of the program before any class or module definition has been opened or after they've all been closed. We'll look next at the top level's ideas about self. So the top level is anything beyond a class or anything beyond a module or anything beyond a method. That's what we're referring to as top level. And the object self is always the main object. So self at top level is the default object main. Is a default object main. And then we have self inside a class definition is the class object itself, just as we've seen. Self inside any method is the object to which the method call was sent. And for a class method, that means the class object. And for an instance method, that means the instance of the class whose instance method it is. So you can, if you take a broader look at this, it's most of the explanations that we've given in this table 5.1. Okay, so we move on, or we're out of time. Yes, Kevin.
Also, I think from this point in now I understand why this is
The what?
okay.
We switch to your screen.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
assuming let me just like you will see this error here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So in where we are calling this age.
Yeah.
Now here we are at this point we are at top level.
Yes.
So the default object is main here.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where I think now understand. Initially I was not understanding this main object.
Okay.
And
Awesome.
when maybe you have now if now you have it in a class.
Mm-hmm.
You have now it is.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's defined for that.
Oh, for the P class. Yeah.
Now it's inside here. It's no longer in the main.
True. And what if we do the class, any class with a method inside and then call an undefined variable?
Oh,
Yes, like that. No, you.
Or if you create an instance of it, then call a method that is
Not okay. Okay, you can try that for this. Also, it's for that instance. Okay, now it makes sense. All right. Awesome. Okay, thank you guys. Next time we'll be looking at, let me see. We'll be looking at top level self object. We'll go a little faster and further because it's the same thing getting explained over and over. Yeah, so we'll take you through that next time. Thank you for sticking around. Bye.
Bye bye.